Hello, I'm your host, Effie Pilarino, and I have the pleasure today to have with me Leda Glyptis, a lady that is very well known in the fintech industry, an innovator, I would say an entrepreneur, and of course, a lady that's from Greece too. So here we are, two Greek ladies. Welcome. Leda?
Thank you so much for having me. So nice to hear my name pronounced properly as well.
Well, I was like, should I say it properly? Should I not?
When you've been away from home for such a long time, like we're in the decades now, it's almost like a pleasant shock when you hear someone saying your name properly. You're like, oh my God, that's so exciting.
The D, that's a delta. Everybody knows delta from mathematics, but nobody can pronounce it, right?
That's very true.
So, it's funny, I was thinking where we met in person, because of course today it matters, where we met in person. That's the connecting point. And I think that we met in person at Cybos 2016 in Geneva.
That's right.
You were back then, where were
QMB.
Yes.
I was like,
yes.
QMB.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it was Cybos Geneva. And it's so strange because, of course, this is Cybos week and we should all be in Boston. And we're not. And it's remote. And it has really forced me to think back. Because Cybos, for those of our listeners who haven't been, it's such a momentous event. It's such a big event. It's such a, it has an incredible energy. It has so many people doing business. But for me, thinking back, particularly this week, it's the relationships I have built at Cybos and through Cybos over the years. Because of course, even you, Effie, I knew who you were. I had been reading your stuff. I had been following your stuff, but we didn't get an opportunity to meet in person until Cybos. And it is the place where the great and the good always come together, isn't it?
It is. And of course, back then too, Cybos, which represented only predominantly the traditional side of finance, was already starting to integrate, all the innovation that was going on and now is grown up largely. And as you said, such an energy, that place that I must say, I miss it a lot. And who knows for how long.
I miss it too.
Yeah,
I miss it too. I'm finding myself that the people who are Cybos addicts like myself feel the same way. But anyone who hasn't been, I struggle to explain why I miss a conference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a theme that we could be talking a lot because we've been in this weird situation for now, 6-8 months, and for sure we're not going to see a large event like that for another 6-8 months and maybe more. So let's hit the nail and talk about your new move to Findexable. And I've seen the excitement in your eyes. I could even sense it in the tweets. This is not just a plain move. And from my point of view, without knowing too much about Findexable, I only know, about the index. And honestly, when I read the first time about the global index, I'm like, okay, this must be something for investments because that's where I come from. So I thought it was a fintech index that can be investable, but I guess it's not. It gives me a lot of joy that you have made the move that's so much broader, and it's all about building ecosystems. So I want to hear more about it.
So, well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. You're right. There is a lot of excitement, and there's a lot of excitement for me for three reasons. One is very personal. the other is a sort of moment in time, and the third is specifically about Findexable. The first is that there is a sort of pretty big change coming in my life. Findexable is the first of what I hope will be a series of announcements. So watch this space, and hopefully we get to speak again. But it is it's very exciting on a personal level, because by taking this board position with Findexable, chair of the board position, and a couple of other collaborations that I'm hoping will be kicking off in the next few weeks, and we'll get to talk about those. I've been, for the first time in my career, liberated from that need to compromise on something, right? The only thing I have to compromise on with what I'm trying to do now is sleep. But the ability to do the things you feel passionate about, and do the things you believe in, and dedicate and channel your time in a way that allows you to have the most impact, it is amazing. So Findexable is, as I said, is a board appointment. So I look forward to being part of the journey. It's not a full-time role, but I hope that the team will get to see and feel that I'm a part of the team. But on a personal level, it's great, because it's the first step in a new journey, which again, I hope we will talk about as it unfolds. Watch this space for a couple more pieces. The second thing is that you become a senior when this happens, but it's a nice feeling. The Women in Fintech Power list that comes out every year, and in the last couple of years I've changed categories, and I appear in the senior leaders, veterans category. And my first reaction was, oh, I'm getting old. My second reaction, though, was, wow, that allows me to do more of what I'm good at. And one of the things that feels amazing about a chair appointment is that I can bring what I'm good at to help a team that's good at a million things that I'm not good at. Mm-hmm. And that balance only comes when you've got a certain type of experience, and thankfully we're getting to that place now. So I think that moment is particularly exciting. Findexable specifically really, really caught my eye, because we talk about democratization of finance a lot in fintech. We talk about technologies and our ways of working all having a higher purpose of leveling access, of making things more transparent, more accessible. And it's questionable how good we have been at actually doing that. But there hasn't necessarily been much democracy and access within the fintech world. Position, geography, contacts have always been pivotal in allowing entities and ideas access to investors, to talent, to opportunities. And Findexable positions itself as a essentially real-time non-emotional benchmarking capability. And non-emotional is not how they describe themselves, but it is how I describe them, because you very often see those 50, 10, 20, 100 lists of whatever. You see those reports on the best payments companies, the best female founders, the best London companies, and you dig in and you're like, best at what? And the answer tends to be that some very clever people did some research, and these are the ones they found, and they have created some heuristics, and it's absolutely better than nothing, but it's not very objective. So you can't use that data to benchmark anything. You can only use it to inform your own judgment. So what I like about Findexable is they're trying to use a set of data sets that are publicly available, or that are to be offered and contributed by the entities themselves, but that is objective and falsifiable data that can create that comparative benchmark. I also really like the fact that it relies on the entities themselves participating in the exercise, choosing that transparency. It's not imposed upon anyone. And it, as we grow it and scale it, I personally see immense value for three groups. You're absolutely right. There's value for the investors. And there is a piece that simplifies that legwork, that due diligence work, but also that scouting work that investors did. Definitely during COVID times when conferences and ecosystem access isn't the same. But also it allows someone to sit at their desk and access ideas and companies in places they've never visited. It also gives the companies from a place that has no fintech pedigree access to the world. So there's definitely a massive angle that is useful for investors. I think the second piece that becomes very valuable is for the companies themselves. Once they've contributed some of the data and also once Findexable has pulled some of the publicly available data, there is an objective component to any pitch document or any client presentation or any employer branding. If you're positioned particularly well in an external third-party benchmark on your gender diversity, on your carbon footprint, or whatever it is you might be measuring, on the age of your founders, of your investability, all of those factors, the minute you have an objective benchmarking tools, it becomes an asset for the company to both curate its profile and to pull and say, well, according to that third party, I'm in the top percentile for, which I think becomes very, very powerful for the companies themselves and an incentive in curating those profiles. And also it's useful for candidates because younger people, and I say younger people because my generation never thought of asking those questions. They lead with those questions. How do you perform against this? What's your inclusion? What's your positioning versus your peers? So it becomes a multiply useful tool as we grow.
Yeah, can I interrupt you? I mean, the more you describe what Findexable is building on a global scale, how is this different than a fintech-focused Crunchbase? And is there a focus here on SMEs? Is there a focus on job facilitation or on investments, or is there no focus?
So that's a very good question. And I hope that as we speak again, as the company grows, the answer would become more and more nuanced, and it might change and pivot. The original focus was around investment. And the original customer persona was around the investor. There is increasingly an appreciation that there is a natural home there for both jobs boards and access to those jobs for people who are hungry to break into the space, who might want to travel and reach companies that are not based in their location. And there is a jobs piece to the Findexable site that I think stands to grow. Mm-hmm. And there was also, again, at its inception, a geographic focus. When I first talked to the founder team, one of the things they said, which resonated with me, was breaking into the fintech ecosystem was easy if you were based in London or in Berlin or in Tel Aviv, but it was extremely difficult if you were based in a small town in Eastern Europe, most places in Asia, almost everywhere in Africa. So being able to put yourself on the map without having to put yourself on a plane has immense value for the players themselves, but also for the investors who want to find the best and brightest, but can't go to every city in the world. So creating that geographic bridging was very much part of the mission statement at the starting point. And I absolutely see that as immensely valuable, but I actually think that as you start capturing those objective data sets and the population that is on the index grows, the usefulness and the things for which people will turn to it, I expect will grow.
Will grow. So, I mean, for me, I'm hearing that it's more of a knowledge map rather than an index. Because again, I'm very sort of, when I hear index, I'm really thinking of a list that has been curated based on some criteria. So for me, the approach is a knowledge map. And am I correct that the business proposition of Indexable is to sell analytics on that knowledge map, and everybody can ask for whatever interests them?
So that's a very good question, and my answer to that is it's an evolving picture because Findexable is a young company still.
Mhm.
There are a few ideas of, so there are pretty specific ideas on who the users are, but the idea of where the customer will be is evolving. I think the appetite to create an index is very much there, but you're right, the way to that index is through that knowledge map. And what is driving the team is very much the desire to create that transparency and to create that real-time benchmarking that is non-emotional and non-qualitative. That doesn't mean they don't do qualitative work, and I do see and expect that to continue, that there will be a layer of qualitative work and sort of analytics that can be customized on top of it. But the driving appetite to create that objective is a hard word, but let's go for it.
Yeah.
An accurate and impartial benchmark where the companies that opt in can position themselves, as you say, both in a global heat map of what's happening where, but also against each other in terms of their maturity, in terms of their funding cycles, in terms of eventually performance as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's only focused on private companies, right? We're not talking about any publicly traded companies on.
No, not at the moment, and there is no intention of taking it in that direction. But the value of what is being built could very easily lie in the fact that once you've created that citizenship and that footprint, crunching the data multiply to create additional indices and additional benchmarks for the things that the industry is interested in as you grow could take us in different directions. I mean, I think 5-10 years ago, having a diversity index would not necessarily have been as interesting as it would be today, even though it would have been equally valuable.
Right, right. Can this eventually lead us to create a rating agency for fintechs globally? Do you think that could
like that.
be on the roadmap?
I like it. Will you charge us if we put it on the roadmap now? We have not discussed it in those terms, but I do suspect that the data could definitely be used for that purpose. And the investability of companies. Essentially, the exam question was, how can you help the investor, A, know about companies, and B, decide whether they're worth a deeper dive without doing all the legwork themselves? So the natural next step as you follow that down that line would be to create a sort of Moody's for fintech. It's not in the roadmap as a line item as that, although I like that idea. But it's very much trying to create a sense of objectivity, which is exactly what the ratings agencies do.
Yes, yes. And then there's, the credit part that one can focus that should be on based on objective quantitative criteria, but there's of course another qualitative part that's more difficult, right? That has to do
Exactly.
with the team and so on. But I think that that we need there. I mean, in my mind, there's so many things that fintech has not accomplished yet, has not even scratched the surface. Rating agencies is just one of many of them in the capital
It is.
markets.
And
Right?
I'll be honest with you, when I first heard about Findexable, my first reaction was, is this the thing we need the most? But the more I think about, well, actually not now, before I made the decision, the more I thought about what it is they're trying to do, I did appreciate that in an industry that is all about transparency, there's very little. In an industry that's all about access, there is very little that isn't personal relationship or social media reach. And in an industry that is all about information, actually most of what we have is either disorganized, because a lot of the information is available on LinkedIn or a company's house or equivalent, but it's not organized and pulled in one place. So there is immense value in having that objective data set gathering, and then that creation of the benchmarking. To your point, how we use that data and that benchmarking then becomes a very interesting exercise.
Very interesting exercise. And if one looks at, the different funding options for private companies, depending on their maturity, definitely analytics or benchmarking of this sort are very useful before going into the deep dive analysis, because at the end of the day, it's a question of resources. How do you allocate your resources? And in many cases, I mean, the investors, they miss opportunities simply because they didn't have the time and the information quickly and easily available to make the curation, if you want, or filtering or shortlist. And you miss on.
And it becomes an interesting, I think that there are, as this thing grows, they become two very interesting questions. One is, as an investor, if you could, without leaving your office, balance your portfolio for geography, diversity, inclusion, and whatever other index, carbon footprint, whatever other index whatever other factor, if you could balance your portfolio against those indices, would you, or would you at least measure them? My instinct would be yes to both, but right now it's next to impossible to do. The second thing that becomes very interesting is, if you were an investor that has an investment thesis that is all around a particular behavior, this would allow you to go into the index and cast your net so wide, and you would be able to find out whether there is a company that works on applied AI for medical research in Nicaragua, which is not a question you would ever be able to ask before. Now, for that to be able to happen, of course, you need that company in Nicaragua to be on the platform. But the onboarding process is actually pretty straightforward. And our hope and aspiration is that the advantage of having that footprint to the startup will be considerable versus the time and effort that it takes to create that footprint, that actually people will self-select. Now, we also expect that partnerships will be valuable, in the sense of,
Fintechs, you mean?
Exactly, or like the Association of Nicaraguan Fintechs might actually push the idea out there to make sure that their community is on the map. Now, I've talked about Nicaragua so much, we're going to have to do that.
Another thing that is very important is you have a fintech in a sort of peripheral, if you want, fintech hub because of its geography, and they're looking to partner with another fintech, either for a collaboration, for a pilot, just to create a fuller innovation stack, and they don't have a way to find who they should even start talking to.
That's right. I mean, I'm advising a very, very early company at the moment who are trying to design a solution for an extremely specialist group. And they were asking me the other day, does anyone else do this? we don't actually want to build the tech. We just want to build the proposition for this group. Does anyone else have this so we can white label it? And I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume not, because to the earlier point we were making, currently the only way of knowing what's out there is to be plugged in, to be connected, to have those relationships. We have them, and therefore if we don't know about it, the chances that we can't find out about it are high. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Exactly, and that's a sort of an analog process of doing things, right?
For a fintech, tech-driven, data-driven world,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
taken us a very long time to get to this, right?
So really we're talking about a crowd-funded open source directory, because I assume the directory will be open source. And then is it the data that is going to be monetized, or the analytics on the data?
The answer to that,
Is not set in stone yet.
well, so because we're early, I think then that's my personal view. Both of those things should be explored, because there is no hard and fast model to replicate for this, right? So I think selling additional analytics is definitely a valuable model. There might be a subscription basis to this, of sort of having a freemium, then more complicated. I suspect that there's a way of having multiple user footprints, particularly if this increasingly and with scale becomes a resource for employees. Then you want to make sure that the 20-year-old looking for a job absolutely has access for free. The startup trying to get themselves on their journey actually doesn't get disadvantaged, but at the same time that you compare like with like in terms of a startup that is five days old and a company that's five years old, and then in terms of what functionality you get to consume, having some sort of tiered subscription model, and the analytics on top. The answer is we will explore both of those. We're conscious that as we home in on the value that the various users get from it, the customer who's willing to pay for it will emerge.
Great. Great, Leda. I think that I will keep more bandwidth to talk about whatever your future announcements. And as you mentioned that,
Please do.
we stay tuned, right?
Stay tuned.
We stay tuned, and I'm sure that they will also be in alignment with your approach to the ecosystem, which is really to add value as a team player, and to sort of lift the system from where it is right now, instead of just moving one little point that is an incremental value add. That
I
is,
appreciate you saying that, because I am very much trying to do that, but it means a lot that it looks like that from the outside, because it's not always easy.
it's not easy, and it's not it's never something that you can measure. It's got a qualitative aspect to it, I find, and I strongly believe. So it's like it's about the journey with that mission, really.
Yeah.
So once you have that intention, everything that you do, you'll bring that kind of attitude to it. So in a way, it doesn't. I'm positive that you're going to bring the attitude, that positive.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leda, for being with us today.
And thank you for having me.